French president wants to form a 10-nation coalition for future emergencies. Impatient with German foot dragging on defense, French President Emmanuel Macron will bring together a 10-nation coalition of the willing next month designed to prepare European armed forces to take action together in emergencies, and to bind Britain into military cooperation as it leaves the EU. Defense ministers of France, the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, Denmark and Estonia will sign a letter of intent in Paris in June, officials told me, pledging to develop a common strategic culture, share analysis and foresight on trouble spots that may require intervention and work to coordinate their forces for future operations. Macron outlined the idea in his keynote Sorbonne speech on European integration last September, calling for a common European intervention force, defense budget and doctrine for action in contingencies where the United States and NATO may not get involved. France wants to recruit allies that could help share its military burden, especially in Africa, where it intervened alone in Mali in 2012 to prevent Islamist militants seizing control of a weak state. Frustrated by the big tent, low-ambition start to the European Union's so-called Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO, in defense agreed last year at Germany's insistence, the French leader is pressing ahead with a small core of like-minded nations outside EU and NATO institutional structures. British Prime Minister Theresa May quietly endorsed the initiative at a Franco-British summit at the Sandhurst Military Academy in January but did not publicise the step to avoid antagonising hardline Brexiteers in her Conservative Party, to whom any idea of an EU army is anathema. She did announce a practical move to help the French in the Sahel region, making available 3 heavy-lift Chinook helicopters to support operations in Mali. It's really important to have the British on board, not just because they have the most capable, rapidly deployable armed forces along with our own, but also because we share the same strategic culture and history of projecting force outside Europe, a senior French source said. Alice Pannier, an expert on Franco-British defense cooperation at Johns Hopkins University in Washington, said the French idea was to bring together those European countries most experienced in military interventions and UN peacekeeping missions, some of which are not involved in PESCO for political reasons, such as Denmark and Britain. Paris also approached non-NATO Sweden and Finland and non-EU Norway about the initiative, but they chose to stay out at least initially, diplomats said. Under other circumstances, the French would have liked to include Poland, the most serious military player in former communist Central Europe, but that seems impossible as long as Jaroslaw Kaczynski's ruling Law and Justice Party stays on its authoritarian nationalist course. By involving Estonia, they made sure they have an Eastern EU member country on the front line with Russia engaged from the outset. Berlin is uncomfortable with the initiative, not least because any talk of intervention upsets peace-loving Germans and raises prickly questions about legal mandates and parliamentary approval. Some officials in Berlin and Brussels regard the European Intervention Initiative, as Macron's project is called, with suspicion as a rival to PESCO. Nevertheless, Berlin is attending the early June launch to avoid a Franco-German rift and to keep an eye on what Paris and London are doing, a German source said. French officials were irked that Germany publicly refused to join a US-French-British airstrike on Syria last month over the use of chemical weapons, although Chancellor Angela Merkel did back the strikes after they were carried out. They are exasperated at the new German government's failure to do more to boost the defense budget, given its big fiscal surplus and its commitment to move toward NATO's goal of defense spending as 2% of gross domestic product. German spending is stalled at 1.2%. Despite its reticence about using force, Germany has about 1,000 soldiers in Mali supporting the French counterterrorism campaign by serving in a UN peacekeeping force and participating in an EU military training mission. Draw Berlin deeper into defense cooperation remains a French priority. Only Germany has the money to make major next-generation armaments projects feasible, and only the Franco-German engine can drive the EU forward, even if it is sputtering on a range of issues at the moment. Not all the news from Berlin is negative. The French and German defense ministers signed an agreement at the Berlin International Air Show on the high-level requirements for a next-generation fighter to be developed jointly by historic rivals Dassault Aviation and Airbus to replace the French Rafale and pan-European Eurofighter, Typhoon warplanes. The French say they are open to Britain joining the plan at a later stage. Big challenges remain ahead of the project, including agreeing a common timetable and detailed military specifications, and finding an interim solution to replace Germany's aging nuclear-capable Tornado planes. Another obstacle is reconciling arms export rules to meet France's global export ambitions and Germany's severe restrictions on the countries to which it may sell weapons. The previous German government infuriated Paris by blocking sales of jointly produced helicopters to Gulf states and Kazakhstan. Although Berlin has come a long way on the role of the armed forces, it remains uncertain how far Germany will be willing to use the Bundeswehr in action outside Europe, except as UN-mandated peacekeepers after the French and British have done the dirty work of intervention. Some 25 EU member countries signed up for the launch of PESCO, agreeing to a laundry list of mostly modest projects that will help plug capability gaps and reduce duplication among European militaries. Significantly, Italian companies have taken the lead in more projects than the French, who see the EU effort as being of limited value. French officials say Macron's initiative is not about creating new battle groups but more about sharing analysis of potential crisis situations in Europe's neighborhood and beyond that might require action. This might involve, for example, evacuating European nationals from civil strife in Venezuela or an African nation, or tackling a humanitarian refugee crisis in a country like Libya. It's about scoping out and jointly analyzing the sort of problems that can arise and knowing how to manage them together as effectively as possible if they materialize, a French defense source said. It's about feeling out our partners' priorities and knowing in advance how and how much they could contribute if a specific crisis arises. French officials insist Macron's initiative is complementary and compatible with PESCO and NATO and does not undercut efforts to build stronger defense capabilities among all willing EU countries. But the reality is that only small group coalitions are likely to be ready and willing to take robust military action outside Europe. As the 2011 Libya war showed, that will almost always involve France and Britain, but probably not the reluctant Germans, or the procedure-bound EU as a whole. The next time a crisis strikes somewhere on Europe's southern fringes, France and Britain are likely to be on the front lines in uniform. Don't expect the Germans to show up until the fighting is over. Daniel 7:16-18. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Daniel 7:19-22. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Daniel 2:40-43. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, Forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Revelation 17:12-14. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords, and King of kings, and they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. Daniel 2:44-45. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. 2 Esdras 6:9. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Revelation 14:12. Here is the patience of the saints, here are they that keep the commandments of God, and the faith of Jesus. Shalom.